Okay, welcome to Catastrophe, the New York Rescuer Alliance podcast, where we have Rose Martin, also known as My Feral Lady, and Laila Sultana. These are two rescuers. We're going to let them introduce themselves, tell us where they rescue, how they got started rescuing, and then we can kind of jump into what is going on in New York City right now. But I'll just add, as a way of introducing the podcast, that we're doing this to really shine a spotlight on rescuers who are operating really under crisis conditions. A lot of New Yorkers, if you don't have a feral cat problem in your neighborhood, then you probably live in the lower half of Manhattan and may be unaware that New York City actually has no animal welfare services outside of a very underfunded shelter system, the animal care centers. So the feral cats, stray cats, all of these are resolved by private individuals who have to access privately funded spay neuter appointments, of which there are fewer and fewer. And so it's becoming a really kind of impossible task, and it's kind of hitting crisis levels this summer. I think the crisis bar started last summer, got worse this summer, and it's a real cat apocalypse. So, yeah, Rose, do you want to get started and introduce yourself and your little
Absolutely.
friend?
Sure. My name is Rose Martin. On social media, I am My Feral Lady. With me, if you are watching this visually, is Toto. He is a rescue kitten who has some not fully sorted out problems. We're not quite sure. He has eyelid agenesis. And he is an excellent example of the current crisis where I was already full. I have 4 kittens in my house that I am fostering, and I had no more room. And a finder who I had worked with in the past reached out to me and said, "We got more kittens." And I was like, "I can't help you." And they sent me a picture, and I realized he was the kind of kitten that would not get the proper care in our safety net systems. And I was like, all right, I guess we're going to make room somehow. So I've only been doing this for 3 years, less than 3 years. And I have placed over 60 cats for adoption and had over 200 cats spayed or neutered and returned. That is the scope of someone who never did cat rescue in their life and right before the pandemic got started. And that's really the scale that we're working with right now. It is quite a catastrophe. And about 6 months ago, someone reached out to me about a new rescuer I rescue in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. I try to keep it to my exact neighborhood walking distance because I don't have a car, which is a huge hindrance because everything is falling on us personally. We have to trap, we have to transport, we have to pay for things, we have to arrange things, we have to speak 3 languages, we have to do everything ourselves. And so I only rescue in Sunset Park. Someone reached out to me about a new rescuer in Borough Park, and I said, I'm happy to coach and train because we desperately need rescuers in Borough Park. And that was Layla. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you for that introduction, Rose. Yeah, I honestly I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rose's guidance from the beginning, and I'm really lucky in that sense to have such a just such a dedicated rescuer kind of guide me through this. She helped me with my very first rescue, who she ended up passing, but she is the reason why I'm doing this. Her name was Miss Andrew, and anytime anyone asks me, how did you get started? I always bring her up. She was a really sweet cat who was one of the I'd say 4 or 5 cats that were right outside my window all the time. And so I spent a lot of time watching them, and I realized, oh, they didn't have regular person feeding them. They didn't have any shelter. They slept under the cars, very unsafe. And so one Andrew got sick, and she just wasn't getting better. No one was getting her care. And I thought, what can I possibly do? What are some resources that I can find? The only thing I could find close by was Rose. And thank God for social media. I was able to get in touch with her and honestly was surprised that she replied. because I know now that she's completely overwhelmed all the time. And we all are. So Miss Andrew, I was too late to get help from Miss Andrew. That's why she ended up. It was a preventable death, and it was something that could have been fixed by improving living conditions for them. And that just sort of, it's such a sensitive, it just really introduced me to the life of a stray cat. And she was she wasn't a feral cat. And, it was clear that this cat was at some point someone's loving pet. And I had everything aligned. I had finally, after months and months of looking, I got certified. I got an appointment. I got TNR certified. I got an appointment for her at a vet. I had transport. I had a place to hold her. I mean, all these things go into our basic TNR practices. These are just really essential resources that we all need. So I would attribute her loss to not having enough resources. I reached out to everyone and anyone, and a lot of people were overwhelmed. I couldn't find traps. I couldn't find, I didn't have transport. But that's how I got started. The need was overwhelming, and it's really hard to kind of ignore. They were right outside my window. I think I had moved from Kensington to Borough Park, which is particularly a bad area. And as far as I know, there isn't another rescuer serving the same area as me. And so I kind of had no choice. I kind of just had to step up and do it.
Yeah, I'll just pick up on the word you said, preventable. I mean, we're in a crisis right now that the entire crisis was really preventable. And I think I would say that what's happening now is the illusion of progress was removed. I'm not sure that rescuers alone were ever going to fully solve this problem. It kind of looked like progress was slow but steady before the pandemic. But, what I was hearing from rescuers after the pandemic or during the pandemic, there was maybe 6 months when the ASPCA shut down, which is really the main supplier of spay neuter appointments. And then they never really picked back up at the amount of spay neuter appointments they had before. And then there was the vet shortage. So we've never regained the amount of spay neuter appointments we had access to before, which were really probably barely enough to maybe maintain or get some blocks under control. And people were saying 15 years of progress have been erased. I'm not really sure that privately funded spay neuter was going to do that trick altogether. Maybe the pandemic just kind of revealed the inadequacy of what was really happening all along. Because in my research, I haven't seen any city that actually got their problem under control without some publicly funded spay neuter, some public program, some animal welfare service. So yeah, for New York City to be the size that we are and not have even an animal welfare department, not even have a single agency dedicated to the issue, I think most New Yorkers would be shocked to learn that New York is basically completely negligent on this and just offloading this onto private citizens to solve this problem. And the problem is worse in the areas like Borough Park, where you actually don't have a lot of resources and rescuers. And it gets worse in your more low income neighborhoods where people just don't have that disposable income or free time to dedicate to solving the problem. So this is kind of probably what you've seen as well, both of you in your neighborhoods.
Yeah, in Sunset Park, every time I trap, neighbors are very curious and they usually ask me what's going on. And then their first question is, "You get paid to do this?" And I laugh and I say, "Oh, no, they don't pay me to do this. This costs money." And they look at me like I have two heads. Who on earth would spend their free time? Because usually they see me, I'm staked out somewhere from 6 p.m. to past midnight. And they're like, who would spend their precious free time and their own money on these cats that have lived there, from their perspective for dozens and dozens of years? And they truly cannot understand how someone could do it. Meanwhile, when I deal with neighborhoods that have more resources, my favorite story ever is that in a more affluent neighborhood in Brooklyn, there was a thread online that we see once a week. Starts out the one that we see once a week that's, "Hey, I saw a cat. I really want to help it." and someone jumps in and says, "Oh, I have a trap. You can borrow it. I live on this street." And someone else says, "Well, oh, if you guys do that, I'll pay for the vet." And someone else says, "I have a car." And it's in 10 minutes, you see the timestamps online. This cat is taken care of. And in my neighborhood, and it was 3 p.m. People are still working and they're commuting home and they have children to feed and they don't have time for every cat that they see. Plus, our blocks have many more cats. I saw a cat, I want to help it is not a sentence that ever occurs to someone in Sunset Park or Borough Park because they see cats every day when they walk home from the subway. There is no, the attitude if you see a loose dog in New York City is someone must help this dog. He is loose. This is not right. And they see a cat and it is not the same thing at all. Although it is in the more affluent neighborhoods, they look at it and people want to help. When they have the time and the resources, they help. And the city needs to step in and be the equalizing force that says, okay, Dumbo and downtown Brooklyn have all these private resources and people who have time and money and they can take care of themselves. And Brownsville, Gravesend, Canarsie, you do not have such resources, and we will step in to help you because the will is there. People are good. They want to help animals. And we know that because when they have the means to do so, they help animals.
Yeah, the example I like to bring up is sanitation, right? So we have a public sanitation system, and the goal of that is that every neighborhood gets basic services, no matter who lives in them, or, if there's an equity of service to that every New Yorker has access to. Now, imagine if the Department of Sanitation was like, we're going to stop doing this and we're just going to let neighborhoods solve the sanitation problems themselves. So in wealthy neighborhoods in Manhattan, they would find the money, pool the money to privately source their sanitation, garbage pickup, and all that. But in your Jamaica, Queens, lots of neighborhoods in the Bronx and, Borough Park, these are not people who can pool money and get stuff together. And maybe there'd be a handful of volunteers who would try to help with trash pickup, but you would just have trash everywhere, right? And this is how cities work. This is how cities function by taking tax money and providing basic services. So I don't understand why animal welfare has just fallen out of the equation for New York City altogether. And we've decided New Yorkers don't deserve this.
Yeah, and Bar Park, you get a notification, a post from someone that's forwarded on like Nextdoor or Instagram. And if it's Borough Park, it's going to be there's 3 kittens that are screaming and they've been screaming for 3 days and it's no one's done it. No one's going to? Okay. And someone will usually let me know that there is an issue when there's 10 cats in a parking lot. It's like, it's so commonplace that unless it's really bad and it's very obvious and like people are literally running into cats or something like that, it doesn't even occur to people to bring it up or even try to find help. And I know that in that respect, I feel like other areas are a little better. People are actually trying to find help. I think that.
I agree completely. In the baseline situation in neighborhoods that do not have the resources to tend to themselves only attract the most dramatic disaster level action items. Laila has a fantastic rescue story it's not good. It has a good ending, but it's totally tragic that, every rescuer almost every day opens Instagram or gets a text that says kittens are in danger. And Laila got one that was for real. It was these kittens. There are 3 kittens. One is sick. It is dying. Come to this address. And she hopped in her car and she went over there. And there were 2 kittens in a cardboard box being held by presumably children. We're actually not sure. Young teenager, young adults, and shoved them at her and said, "Take these cats. We don't want them in this neighborhood." And she looks down and they are covered in spray paint. red spray paint. She looks over and sees a fence, and it has streaks of red paint where someone has chased them back and forth. And she says, she just shuts her mouth and says, "Okay, thank you. Where's the sick kitten? You said one was sick, and these ones are covered in spray paint. They are not doing well, but they are not, ailing, dying." And they just gesture, into the yard and say, "Oh, there's another one in there." And she goes back there, and there's a kitten with a severe upper respiratory distress. And she is totally stuck with her. Now she has normally that call is a research call. You go and you check it out and you see how serious is the situation. Maybe we make a vet call the next morning and we try to make arrangements. And instead, the situation has changed. It is find help now, today. 9 p.m., I think it was, Layla, wasn't it? Late at night. She calls me. I called the Brooklyn Cat Cafe, which has a veterinary clinic in the basement. And I called everyone that I know who volunteers there. And I said, "Is anyone there who can see kittens tonight?" Because Layla and I do not have the resources to go to one of the 24-hour veterinary services, which are open to all New Yorkers. And in a more affluent neighborhood, someone would whisk them off to one of these services, spend $2,000-$3,000 to get them checked out. And for Layla and I, that is not in the cards. And if we truly had no other options, we would have done that and done a fundraiser after. But thankfully, someone at Brooklyn Bridge Animal Welfare Coalition, which is the rescue wing of the Brooklyn Cat Cafe, was there. A vet tech was there, still late at night, because they work volunteer hours way late at night. And I said, "Layla, get in the car, drive to downtown Brooklyn right now. They will stay until I think it was close to 11 by the time you rode in there, right?"
It was late at night. I just remember that.
And it was the one who was sick, was very sick for many weeks, but did pull through. And the two that were covered in spray paint got triage care. Their eyes and nose were cleared out from the chemicals. We think it was like a rust preventative spray. So very toxic, not eco-friendly spray paints. Let's put it that way. And it took about more than 10 days to get the paint fully out of the fur. But we got the eyes and the nose clear that night. And they're actually available for adoption now, those two. So, but guess what? On that same block right now, that was a very dramatic story. And we got some really good social media footage for it. But the baseline situation on that block is still that some people really don't like cats and no one lives there to help the cats. Like, those were a dramatic story and that got attention and those cats got saved. But Layla routinely turns the corner and finds an abandoned lot with 30 Siamese looking cats inside.
Oh, yeah. Abandoned car with little kittens inside it. That block has a lot of abandoned lots and a lot of cats hiding. And because I went back looking for the mom to the kittens. And, my mission was to really get that block under control. It seems like there hasn't been any TNR there and the population was out of control. And the idea that someone is there to help or feed the cats seemed kind of, to the residents, it seemed strange. And I got a lot of stares and I did get a lot of stories about other cats that were really in bad shape, like face falling off. That was one. Like tumor hanging from the eye socket. I've gotten stories from the residents about the worst ones they could think of. And it's clear that the help is needed. And I'm not equipped to handle that,
Yeah.
Rose was saying, you never know what it's going to cost when you end up taking them to the emergency services. And some of us don't have, because I'm a new rescuer, I don't have a huge following. So I never know if I'm going to be able to fundraise for a kitten like that.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's the unfortunate thing is that when this is offloaded to private citizens, in order to pay for this, unless you're independently wealthy, in which case you probably don't live in the neighborhood where the problem is, and you're not even aware of the problem. But otherwise, you live in this neighborhood probably because you're at an income level yourself that makes this neighborhood affordable. And so you can't afford to spend infinite amounts of money on vet care and spay-neuter appointments. And so now, on top of the rescue work, you have to fundraise and you have to market your efforts and you have to sell your service to people to try to donate and raise money. So it's just so much of this burden is put on rescuers. It's really just insane and ridiculous.
It's like a
Um,
full-time job.
yeah, yeah. And you probably have a regular job that, use for
Exactly.
on top of this. So, nobody's doing this. Like Rose said, nobody's paying you to do this and you're spending money to do it. And I know rescuers who are putting money on credit cards, or sometimes they have to step away from the work because they can't afford it. And yeah, so, but coming
I
to this
think
break painted cat story, did you think about reporting abuse? Or was it
we
just
did.
sort of this?
We gathered all the information and have it ready to go, but because of certain details of this story that we don't actually know if the people who handed Layla those kittens are the perpetrators, they did get these cats to help. And on that exact block, that same block, people reached out to Layla later when she was looking for the mom to say that they did not agree that this was acceptable behavior, that it does not represent them, but they do love animals and
Hmm.
that they wish they could help. So we didn't have solid proof of any specific, wrongdoer. We do have all that information saved, and it was only a month or two ago. And if any evidence ever comes out that we could point just a little bit more specifics to law enforcement, we are ready to do that. Yes. We also, our priority as rescuers, we are not crime investigators. Our priority is to help animals in that neighborhood. And if, just have sirens going off and a bunch of questions being asked about cats, when you go back there to look for new kittens or for the mom or to help other animals, you're not going to be welcome. They're not going to let you in that backyard. They're not going to tell you that feeds them. You're not going to get the cooperation that you need our priority as rescuers is towards the cats. And obviously we want to hold someone accountable who actively harmed cats, but we also have 30, 40 more cats to help in that neighborhood who need to be our top priority.
Yeah, I think like rescuers have to navigate so many complex scenarios, and you all do it with so much. I mean, all the ones I know, all the ones in our network, with so much consideration and empathy and kindness and intelligence. And, on top of navigating these complex neighborhood dynamics, navigating the finances of trying to fund the rescue work, figure out how to pay for these efforts, and there's also like the emotional trauma. I mean, Layla talks about being scarred by her first rescue that didn't make it. And, I know a rescuer who found out that a cat she rescued died in foster care. He had a lot of health issues. She wanted to know the date because every cat she rescued that didn't make it, she remembered all of the dates, and she does a remembrance for them every year on their anniversary. And this is the trauma that rescuers carry with them and the hard decisions that they make that they can't save them all. So these impossible situations that you end up in because New York City has decided this is not their responsibility and animal welfare is not something that they are going to allocate a budget towards or have a department for. So, yeah.
It blows my mind that there's so little public action on it because the feral cat problem in New York City is directly related to property values. We want, as a city, for our properties I'm not a homeowner, but anyone who owns a home in this city has a vested interest in all of us rising together and no neighborhood falling into disarray. And if you buy a home in Sunset Park for $1 million plus, which is supposedly affordable right now, right? Which is absurd to me, but that's the case. And you close on the house and you open the back door and there's 30 feral cats back there. Guess what? That's not a good feeling. That doesn't make you feel pride in your neighborhood. And now you've just been handed this big task of, either figuring out how to get these animals help and finding out that there is no city agency that will help you with it. It is on you.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And
Yeah.
even if it's not your backyard, your neighbor has a vested interest in your yard being nice. It's like kind of like a toxic chemical spill.
Yeah.
You know, that affects everyone.
Yeah. It's a sign of neglect and, and a direct result of lack of city services. But we feel the same way when there's litter on the streets. It shows lack of care. So, yeah, but there was a reporter recently calling some rescuers, and I talked to her, and she said something about, I think the question was, so, if there are feral cats or stray cats wandering around, why is that a problem? If, since when is it okay just to have colonies of feral cats running around, uncared for, maimed, injured, sick, starving? You know, you don't see that in the West Village. You don't see that in Midtown. Is that supposed to be normal in Jamaica, Queens? Is that supposed to be normal in the Bronx? Like,
And Rose was pointing out earlier, imagine if we had stray dogs everywhere. You
right,
would say,
right.
where are we?
Now,
The
in
whole,
New York City, I love New York City and I love New York City old timers. And I love to ask them about growing up in New York City in whatever era, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, up through the 90s. And depending on where they grew up, many people remember when there were stray dogs in the street in Brooklyn, in neighborhoods that now are very nice and affluent. But guess what? We as a society looked at this and decided it is not okay to have off leash dogs running in the street, getting hit by cars, having diseases, suffering in the cold and the heat. And we as a society lifted up together and said, we don't accept this. And I do feel that we are at the corner of seeing that for pet cats as well, because even though these cats display feral behavior, every single one of them is either a dumped pet or a direct descendant, not even that many generations, of a pet that was the responsibility of a human being. They didn't grow here. We brought
Here's
them.
cause
studies
problem. Yeah.
to show that every feral cat is basically, genetically, it's almost identical to house pet. They are all descendants of house cats because, well, someone didn't fix their cat and went out and had kittens somewhere. And it's such a huge problem. We're at such a critical point. It's, either something has to change or just we can't keep going this way. Recently, I had closed intake for cats coming in. And that kind of shows like this is where we are. I mean, this is it's breaking the system. What little support we have with AC is one of the very few resources we have where we, may be able to take in some cats.
He is a fantastic resource for people who are faced with very specific cat scenarios. If they are being evicted from their home and they love their animal and they cannot bring it with them, AC is the city shelter. And until very recently, they could surrender their own cat to AC. AC stopped that this month. We're recording this in August, if this airs later. And that's a huge blow. And for rescuers, even not rescuers, if you were a regular citizen who knew nothing about animal rescue, you found a litter of kittens in your backyard, mom cats often abandon them right around the time that they start to wean. They don't need her milk anymore. And so she just deposits them in a new yard. So you don't even watch them grow up, right? You just open your door one day and there's 2-month-old kittens that are like, hey, you got any food for me? What do you think? And you are not equipped to take this on. I call it the trapeze net. The failsafe was they would accept kittens that were not dependent on the mother for milk. That's usually around 5 weeks and older, and younger than around 3 months, depending. Regular citizens could bring cats there. Or if you found a lost pet, this is the ideal system. I have seen many times someone post on social media saying, I found an obvious pet cat. What do I do with it? It has a collar on. There's no tag, but it obviously belongs to someone. And the advice is usually hold on to it for a day, put up signs, post on social media. But if you truly cannot do anything else, bring it to the city shelter. And more times than not, if this cat was lost and its owners are seeking it, they call the city shelters. Hey, have you got an orange cat? He's big and he has a red collar on. And they go, boop. Yes, someone brought it in yesterday. Come on down and reclaim your pet. AC is not given the funding that it needs from the city to do a good job. And they can't take on all the rescue needs of this city, but for specific things, they are, heroes, absolute heroes. And the fact that they are stretched so thin that they had to close intakes for cats is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah,
And the
and
other
then
issue,
they're a vital resource, and then Glendale is ASPCA is closing one of their spay neuter locations, Glendale in Queens. So it's just like the noose is tightening on rescuers. That your job keeps getting more and more difficult, fewer and fewer resources. So, what would you like to see happen? I mean, what needs to change to make your work possible or to get ahead of the curve, to get ahead of the feline reproductive cycle?
one of the biggest changes that we need is for new rescuers, like to have access to ASPCA spay neuter appointment. I don't have access. Rose does because she was certified before they stopped allowing new rescuers to have access. So I don't have access to free spay and neuter appointments. I have to pay everything out of pocket. And, even at more affordable places, the lower cost places, you basically need a fund for spay and neuter
And what they said
projects.
was that they just don't have enough appointments. So they can't open up to new rescuers because they don't have enough appointments. So, but, you should have as much a chance as anyone else in the system to get an appointment, even if it's odds of one person against 1,000. Like, why not? Why shouldn't you just at least have a chance? The fundamental problem is that they don't have enough spay neuter appointments to even have a reasonable shot at people getting any. Okay, so
I am registered with the ASPCA as a rescuer. I don't have a car. So if I do get one of those spots, I am looking at begging someone for a ride, which means them sacrificing an hour and a half of their day to transport my cats for me, both ways. And by closing the Glendale, Queens location, rescuers in Queens and some parts of Brooklyn where it was closer than the Brooklyn location are really left stranded, even if they can get one of these precious spots. The city passed a law that owned cats cannot roam outside without being neutered. And part of this rule was designed to encourage vouchers for owned pets to get spayed or neutered. And they need to widen this to include unowned pets. That if the city provided vouchers to private vets that paid the private vet their rate, but charged the rescuer bringing it in a much lower rate by having the voucher cover the difference. Vets need to make money. They run a business. I'm not saying that they should volunteer their services. That doesn't work. That's not capitalism. But government programs can step in and support and encourage vets to provide these spots. And this is the voucher system is something that should definitely be explored. Other cities have done it to success.
yeah,
Um,
Los Angeles just did it.
the Los Angeles model, to be totally frank, we definitely do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, some sort of
Um,
incentive for vets to work with rescuers. I was not able to get appointments at certain vets at a rescuer rate. They just told me we're not working with new rescuers. That's all
yeah.
it was for a long time until very recently. And, you know, the issue of getting to ASPCA is a big one. ASPCA and AC both are located way out there, not, you know, nowhere near Borough Park or Sunset Park or
This might blow your
a
mind, but there
barrier.
was a time when it might have been the Mayor's Alliance for Animals. This was under Bloomberg. There was a transport van that you could sign
Yeah.
up for and have cats picked up and brought back to you. And
Yeah.
you didn't even have to have a lot. I think if you had 4 or 5 cats or more, and if you had a 20 cat project, the van could fit 20. I think they could fit 40 cats actually. So, all you had to do was just plan it out in advance and request it, and they would let you. I don't think they ever told me they couldn't come do it. This was back when I was in Kensington doing some, 6 months of a bunch of projects back to back. We used to have resources we don't even have any anymore now. Like, are
Yeah.
operating in like the most resource deprived atmosphere there has ever been.
And there needs to be new ideas as well. I mean, our mayor is a controversial figure, but by appointing the rat czar and spending so much attention with press releases and press conferences about it. He really has drawn attention to this issue and gotten some real movement. And if there can be a rat czar, I really don't see why there can't be a cat duke queen. We'll find something quippy, but I don't see why we can't have the same thing for animals that are frankly much more beloved, right? I actually don't want to harm rats. I would like them to be, naturally declined in population. And cats, similarly, I want there to be fewer cats on the streets. I want them to be spay neutered and to have a good life for what the time they have left and to not reproduce and not have a replacement. And I think that a strong government figure with the right PR could really do wonders in this city.
The number one thing we need a lot more hands on deck. We need a lot more attention. We need a lot more funding because the magnitude of the problem just keeps growing, but resources are dwindling and they're actually decreasing as time goes on. Compared to pre-pandemic times, we have less free spay and neuter appointments from the SPCA. And then, plenty of us rescuers who don't have access to the spay and neuter appointments. But another issue is that the longer we have this uncontrolled population problem, the harder it's going to be to get it under control. And the more dire the state of the stray population will be. Because, compared to Borough Park, let's say in Park Slope, you might see strays, but they're going to be a lot healthier than the ones you find in Borough Park that are just awfully sick. And just most of the cats I rescue, they're in bad shape. It takes a significant amount of fundraising to just keep rescuing. But I think that for me, and I'm pretty sure for Rose as well, the goal is to help more cats. And we would love to do that if we had the resources. There's huge need.
Yeah, there are people out there doing the work. And if it could just get spay neuter appointments, this problem could get solved. But you're right. Like you bring up a point about this problem only gets worse. And the feline reproductive cycle, we are fighting a losing battle with it right now. We solve the problem now when it's easier to solve. Or we solve it later when there's, 100 times as many cats as there are now. So political will doesn't seem to be interested in doing anything right now. So 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years pass. And how many more cats on the street at that point?
It's so true. The old saying is the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago.
Right.
And the second best time is now. It's never going to get better than today. It's only going to get more dire and worse for the cats, worse for animal suffering, worse for property values. If we really want to hit them where it hurts, it's if you want your property values to remain intact, you don't need little kittens dying in your backyards.
It would be a simple thing just to take property taxes and take an allocation of property taxes and let that fund an animal welfare system in New York City. Because you're right, there's a direct correlation. Your property value goes up, your property taxes go up when those signs of neglect are gone. So it's
Everybody can win. Everybody can win, including the cats. And if people don't like cats and they don't want them in their backyard, guess what, man? I'm trying to make fewer cats for you. And if they love cats and they want them to have a good life, so many of my feeders in Sunset Park love these cats that they spend money that they do not have to feed them. And to ask them to cover the cost of veterinary care is absurd. They don't own these animals. They didn't create these animals. They love them and they want them not to suffer. And you're asking them to spend money they simply do not have access to.
And just to change the topic a little bit, Rose, you, along with Cat Cafe, applied for discretionary funding in your city council district. Which council district or who is your council member?
My council member is Alexa Aviles, and I was denied. Animal welfare is not a part of her platform, which I don't agree with. The citizens of Sunset Park love animals. They love their pets, and they also love unowned animals, and they want them to be taken care of. And the city had an opportunity to really help these animals, and they chose not to.
Yeah, and I know, Layla, you couldn't apply because you're not a 501(c)(3). It didn't have a partner who could apply for you. But who is your city council member?
I think my city council member is Shahana Hanif,
I
and
don't,
she
I
is
don't
a
think.
huge animal lover.
Okay,
She's
I don't
yeah,
know if we
she's
had any requests in her district. We didn't have any grants awarded, but there might not have been any requested. I know Cat Cafe submitted several applications in other districts and didn't get any of them. And this is really infuriating considering that there's no resources allocated to this at all. The least they could do is throw a few dollars at us from discretionary funding, and that didn't happen. I mean, I try to make it sound like a win that we did have, you know, twice as many awards came from the year before because of a coordinated effort from rescuers to apply. It should have been 10 times more. We had so many rescuers apply, and everybody could see this crisis coming. So, very mixed feelings about how this discretionary funding campaign went. With rescuers, I tell them I'm disappointed. With other people, I try to paint it as a win. But yeah, so,
I will try again. I will try again next year. One of the smaller wrinkle areas of cat rescue is that areas that are undergoing significant industrial redevelopment, if industrial sites are being converted to retail or housing, or if there's any construction going on, construction sites draw a lot of feral cats. And booming economies mean more cats suffer. And Sunset Park is one of the few districts that construction is going bananas. We love it. We're doing a lot of building. People are saying, build new housing, build new housing. We're doing it in Sunset Park with government support and help. And it's like they didn't want to see one of the small downsides to construction booms. And it's, guess what? You guys are doing this great stuff, but it has this one downside, and maybe you could just band-aid efforts to help it, and they chose not to. I think it was not part of a narrative. That's my theory. But Sunset Park is doing great work in a lot of areas, and I really wish that animal welfare could be one of them.
Yeah, I think we just need more people to be aware of the problem, and that's what we're trying to do here by just getting more rescuers to tell their stories and tell us what's going on, kind of the front lines of this crisis. And so yeah, I know I've had you on for a while now, but any final thoughts you want to share?
I think in addition to the fact that it is kitten season and everyone's overwhelmed, another thing that has been kind of building on top of this, and it sort of doesn't fall into or it shouldn't fall into what role rescuers play, which is dumped pets. So when AC closed their doors to intakes, people, instead of, taking their pets to ACC, a lot of dumped cats started showing up. And, Rose and I subscribe to a lot of groups and a lot of alerts where we just, we get alerts like SOS, some cat's crying somewhere, there's kittens somewhere that's been screaming, no mom. And you can kind of just know, rescuers kind of just know the pulse of their area and dumped pets. All I got in the past month since ACS closed their doors, dumped pets. Just insane amount of reports of pets just even in carriers,
Yeah.
on a 99-degree day, there were 3 cats abandoned somewhere
There
with
was one
nothing, no food,
day
no
in Bay
water.
Ridge that just in a public park, there was a carrier sat open, and a rescuer nearby went over there and scooped it up. It's a tragedy. My own colony behind my house, I moved to Sunset Park in 2020, and there was a stable colony. They had been TNR'd by a previous resident who since left. 8 members, one since passed, so 7 members. Over the past 3 years, every colony has newcomers showing up. That's totally normal. So that was why I pursued TNR certification to help the cats that were there and to help any newcomers that arrived. Every single cat, 11 so far, that has shown up has been a dumped pet, has had exposure to human beings, was not born feral, belonged to someone at some point. And my colony started at 8, one passed, and now there are 7 because I go out there and scoop up a new one and find him a home. And I have one right now, Phantom, who is pet cat, you crawl right up into your arms. And I do not have the room to safely bring him inside, get him the vet care that he needs, and find him a home because I have so many other cats and kittens that are occupying the spot for cats to be adopted. I don't want to do adopted cats. I only want to do trap religion. But
Yeah.
one shows me a Toto of the world who has serious medical issues, I can't say no. And I can't
Yeah.
trust the government's facility to do a good job with special cases.
Yeah.
And right now, I couldn't even bring him to the city shelter if I wanted to. They're not
Yeah.
accepting.
Well, last summer was kind of the beginning of a crisis, and we started organizing because we anticipated that if nothing changed, this summer would be even worse. And at the time, I think we were all thinking as far as feral cats go, right? And I think that has been the big surprise of this summer is the abandoned cat crisis. And a rescuer mentioned to me, like, we need to stop calling this a feral cat crisis because it is now an abandoned cat crisis, which is so much more tragic. At least feral cats, they know how to live on the street. You can trap, neuter, return them, and they're going to be okay if they've got a feeder. But, your abandoned cats, they're not used to living on the street. They don't have the survival skills. And it's such a more complicated rescue because that cat can't just be put back on the street. Now it's like, how do we find him a home? And then it just like creates so much more complications. And I think that has been really kind of the catastrophe of this year that we didn't see coming. That's been really heartbreaking.
I
Yeah,
agree.
and
I
it
think
puts
that they're
so
right.
much on the rescue. We have to basically function at the level of an organization. We have to have our own fosters. We have to have a network of fosters where we can move cats because not every person is going to be a good fit. And we have to have fundraising and donors who donate. We have to make it sustainable if we want to do it in the long term. And so it's just like we said in the beginning, it's like a full-time job. And mind you, there's no guidance, there's no funding coming in. We're crowdsourcing for the most part. And so we're just putting in basically there's no resources really. And at the same time, you're gonna have that dumped pet issues where people are more economically disadvantaged, like in Borough Park, an apartment building. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, hey, there's a cat. Someone moved out and they just left the cat. I actually just moved a block from the Mercy Project. I actually rescued a cat here a couple of months ago. It just left with a carrier and a can of food. And the cat was there for 2-3 days before people started being outraged and people kept saying, well, someone should do something. And so, of course, me and another rescuer got him, and he was terrified. He did not move. He was in a stairwell for 2 to 3 days, just sitting like this. This is how we found him. Every photograph of him was like this.
Yeah.
And that is what it is.
Story where I had a very gregarious, outgoing, beautiful cat show up at my colony and not fit in with the feral cats who were like real survivors, tough guys, bullied him. And my commitment to save that cat is a 3-month thing, right? Where I have to bring him in, I have to get him vet care, I have to socialize him to indoor noises and things, make sure that he actually needed dental surgery. So we had to do a fundraiser. And he only got adopted. I had to commit to 3 months. Then he was with a foster for 6 more months before we found the right home for him. And thankfully we did. But every cat can't be a 9-month project. That's not realistic.
Tell me how people can donate. We post these on social media and people want to help you out. Are you on Venmo, Cash App? How can people help support you?
I'm on Instagram as the Brooklyn Rescues, or the screen name is BK Rescues. And I think that we have a link tree where you can just kind of click and donate right now.
And I'm My Feral Lady on Instagram and TikTok. And mostly my needs right now are food and litter, because even though I prefer to do trap, neuter, return, I have 7 adoptable cats right now that all poop and need to eat. And so if people want to look at a wish list, the food and the litter are much appreciated.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you all have other stuff you need to do with your evening, and and thank you, Toto, for joining us also, our little poster kitty for this episode.
You can fall asleep. Very
Thanks,
interesting.
thanks for giving this podcast a try, and we'll see where it goes. And who knows, maybe we'll do this again soon.